This is DJ.
This is Ish.
And this is
Pero Let Me Tell You.
Dale. That sounds like the name of a hotel. Cabarondo. The Cabarondo.
Oh no, it's a place you go to have really good tortellini.
I guess. So,
where do you want to go Friday? Let's go to the Cabarondo.
The Cabarondo.
Yeah.
Grabando. And that came from Grabando. Anyway, bueno. Episode 34.
Episode 34.
34.
I know. I feel like I haven't seen you in about a day and a half because that's how long it's been.
Yeah, but for better, for worse. You got me, babe.
You and I see each other more than most marriages.
That is true. And that's a good thing.
That is a good
because
thing.
neither of us are ugly.
Oh, thank God. We wouldn't be doing this. I don't have ugly friends.
No. Everyone, welcome to episode 34. Aquí estamos. And we have, I would say a full-packed episode, but we have a very important interview
It's a heavy
today.
episode.
It is a heavy. It's actually heavier than usual.
Yes, and not because we spent the weekend eating cake. It's because of actual content matter. Today's episode, we'll be talking some current events, but we interview Shannon Martinez from the Free Radicals Project, which is an organization that's working to actively basically reform extremists, whether they be white nationalists, supremacists, Nazis, etc. And she talks about her life as well as the work that she does with this organization and how, you can keep an eye on things and make sure that if there's somebody who you think might need their services, you can kind of figure out how to navigate those waters.
I mean, generally...
And I didn't even do it justice with that description, quite honestly.
I mean, generally, our interviews and our guests are a little bit more focused on either cultural aspects like, art, or Miami-based or Hispanic-based. But this, I felt, was like a very important interview, especially in today's time.
Yeah, and it's funny because we actually did this interview a couple weeks back, and it hasn't lost any of its relevancy.
No. I mean,
probably gained.
I think that for the time we live in, it's very important. So,
which sucks for the times we live in, but is great for the fact that we can still broadcast it.
So our interview with Shannon will be coming up a little bit later in the show. But as usual, we're going to start off with some hot topics. And
yes, we got the one hot topic.
What is hotter than Brett Kavanaugh?
J-Lo on the beach?
True.
Okay.
But J-Lo on the beach, even when she gets like 2 million likes on a selfie on her Instagram, doesn't get as much media coverage as this whole Brett Kavanaugh debacle is going on. As you guys probably know, Brett Kavanaugh is a Supreme Court justice pick for
the nominee
for the Donald Trump administration, and he was going to be confirmed, but then these allegations of sexual misconduct or sexual abuse have come up.
Which, as of this recording, I think there's 3.
There are 3.
Currently?
And the latest one that came out is by a lady called Julie Sweetnick, and her allegations are quite damning.
I haven't heard them, to be honest.
So let's review a little bit of what all 3 allegations.
Here.
The first allegation that came out was by Dr. Christine Blasey Ford, and basically what she was saying was that when they were in high school,
they were at a party.
She partied a lot with him, and she went to a lot of parties where he was and his friends were at, and there was a specific incident where apparently he may have been drunk, where
she alleges
they were fooling around. He got on top of her and kind of groped her inappropriately. Well, groping is inappropriate.
Well, sometimes I kind of like
he groped her, and as such, he did.
She was able to get away from the room, according to her story.
Right. So that's certainly, if those allegations are true, that certainly is sexual misconduct. The second allegation is from Deborah Ramirez, and she says that during her time at Yale, he exposed himself to her. Her allegations are a little bit shaky because she doesn't directly remember him.
Is this the one that Ronan Farrow and someone else were reporting on, but they're kind of being criticized for their lack of being able to corroborate details?
Well, Ronan Farrow, I think it was with the first one.
But I've heard recently that her...
I'm not sure Ronan Farrow also met her, but actually that's where I was going. It's very iffy. Like, she thinks it was him because she heard somebody say that it was him that he exposed himself
Right.
to her, but she doesn't actually remember because she was intoxicated. She knows that he was there. It's very
fuzzy.
very fuzzy. But now the third one that came out is, as I said, by Julie Sweetnick, and it came out via an affidavit. She says that. I forget if it was when he was in high school or in college, but it was certainly in the early 80s, that there was an instance where she was drugged and she was intoxicated and she was gang raped.
Okay.
Now, she says that he did not rape her, that he was not part of those men that raped her, but that he was in the room.
Just standing there? Again,
Either just standing there or somewhere close in the vicinity.
Okay.
Now, my only problem with her coming out is that this affidavit was introduced by Michael Avenatti, who Michael Avenatti is the attorney for Stormy Daniels.
Oh.
Now, I don't have a problem with Stormy Daniels. I don't have a problem with what...
I have an issue with people trying to make Stormy Daniels out to be a victim.
I have an issue with people trying to make her... I do believe she's a victim. I don't think she's a hero.
Well, there we go. That's what I'm saying. Like, alguien que le tengas que tener lástima. Because I don't think Stormy Daniels is...
No. I do feel bad for her because...
No, I don't.
I don't know, because the problem with Stormy Daniels is not so much that she slept with Donald Trump. I mean, whatever. She slept with Donald Trump. The problem with Stormy Daniels is that after the fact, she was threatened by one of his people.
Okay, fair enough. But what I'm saying is, this is not somebody, to me, on the same levels as, for instance, the women who accused Bill Cosby.
No,
and people want to draw parallels.
But I don't know. But I don't think they are. And she's very articulate in interviews, and she's straight out said that this has increased her business, and that she knew that it would, and she doesn't have she's very honest about it. I believe that Michael Avenatti is a total media whore.
Right.
I think he's doing this for a greager purpose in terms to a self-serving way.
I was going to say greater purpose.
I don't think that he is really this
There's
advocate
no greater good
of like a Ronan Farrow. Ronan Farrow, I really do believe, is doing this for the greater good and for.
So you'd say he's a little more Gloria Allred than Ronan Farrow?
Michael Avenatti, totally. In fact, Michael Avenatti has said that he wants to run for president, that he's thinking about running for president.
Oh, good for him.
I mean, this doesn't take away from this woman, but it for me
puts a bad taste in your mouth.
I mean, I've been following this like many people from the beginning. It just, I don't know anything that I feel that he brings in. I mean, with the Stormy Daniels interview thing, he had made like 300 media appearances. Just on The View alone, he's been like 3 times on The View talking about the same thing. Just on that one show. So, but let's take it back again to the Brett Kavanaugh thing.
Correct.
So, these women are coming out saying these things about him. None of them directly allege that he raped her. They all say that he, one that he groped her, one that he may have exposed, but we weren't. Another one that he was in the room when she was raped. But none of the allegations are that he directly raped her. These allegations were over 30, close to 40 years ago. Right. The ones of Dr. Ford especially, they're high school, and with that whole argument, they're looking at his yearbook and quotes in the yearbook. Right. So my question to you is, obviously this man, whether you agree with his position as a judge or not,
right,
but this man went on to have a very distinguished legal career, because I mean, if you're a Supreme Court nominee for anyone, you've had a very distinguished career. Right. So he went on to be very successful and obviously very good at what he does, again, whether you agree with him or not. So my question to you is, do you think that some shady business he was involved in close to 40 years ago, some of it even during high school, do you think that that's something that should come and haunt him now, that as a 50-some-year-old man and established professional, can cost him his career, in essence?
Okay, so let's
further, throw the talking point at you. This wasn't a situation like a Harvey Weinstein where he was using his power as an executive to manipulate women to do whatever he wanted.
Right.
I mean, he was this jock or this high school kid.
He was a popular kid in school or whatever, at most. And that's kind of where I'm going. I guess we'll start with the second one, the the lady who says, he may or may not have exposed himself to her. My stance on that is, to me, it's not that I don't think she's credible. Number one, by her own admission, she doesn't know if it was or it wasn't him. She thinks it might be, it could have been. But I'm going to lump that one in with stupid teenage quote-unquote behavior of like, when you moon someone or, or you do something. Is it inappropriate? Is it stupid? Yes. But is it something that, when you're 52 years old, somebody should be able to come back and be like, oh, well, you're not qualified for this because as a teenager, you
right.
mooned somebody. Or you took your dick out and, wagged it around, running around in the lunch yard or whatever. You know what I mean? Is it inappropriate? Absolutely. But is it, quote unquote, stupid kid shit? Absolutely. Because we're talking about at a point in time where you don't have the mental facility to say this is, quote unquote, inappropriate on an adult level. That's why we're not adults until we're 18.
Right.
Now, with the first lady, not Melania,
Christine Blasey Ford.
Dr. Blasey Ford?
Yes.
Okay, I got that right. Yay. With hers, I'm a little more, again, it was I could say here it was a different time. It was the 80s. We weren't as quote unquote woke, even though I fucking hate that term.
I think he was I think he was underage. He was in high school, so he was probably underage.
At most, he was 18.
Yeah.
If he was in high school, right? It could have been a situation of somebody, trying to go a little further than first base and not taking no for the answer and what have you, and fair enough. That doesn't necessarily make you a predator.
Right.
I don't believe that, by my own admission, I've been out on dates, and I've been in situations where, you start out kissing and your hand goes a little further down.
How many movies from the 80s a guy is like...
The entire 80s, cinema is based on that. And so whether it's right or wrong is beside the point. What I'm saying is we're all guilty of it. So it doesn't mean we should all... And I use the all in the royal we term. The third one... I'm blanking on... what she was saying is that he was in the room.
Okay, in other words, he was present. Present, but I guess the bigger message or the bigger picture that she would allege by that, or an argument that you could make, is that at that
guilty
time
by association.
He was into that whole kind of
voyeur,
frat boy rape culture, kind of, sort of.
It could be,
which we know does exist.
It does exist, and it could be. However, I'm not this guy's primo. I'm not, trying to make... But you also never know how you're going to react in certain situations. And what if this is a guy who just genuinely froze in that situation?
So let me ask you this.
Again, I'm not making excuses for him, but I'm just saying...
Let me ask you this, and you're making good points. Do you think that because this is a nomination for a Supreme Court justice, so, this is a lifelong position, you're pretty much shaping policy that's going to affect every single American, every single person in the country. Do you think that the people that are subject to this nomination should be held at a higher scrutiny than everybody else?
There's higher scrutiny, and then there's dredging to see what you can find. Do I think that these people's allegations should be heard? Absolutely. Do I think it's something that should be made aware? Yes. But, the same way, are we going to judge Ruth Bader, Ginsburg because in 1912 she showed an ankle?
And okay, I'm going to throw another curveball at you. Do you think that if this would have happened 5 years ago, it would have been as a bigger issue than now in the Me Too movement?
No, because we've got the Me Too and the Time's
Because obviously they're doing a lot of parallels to Anita Baker in 1990. Anita Hill. Anita Hill in 1991.
Yes, we all remember where we were when Anita Baker was on Capitol Hill.
To Anita Hill in 1991.
Yeah.
So they're running a lot of parallels with that because, a criticism of that was that the panel was an all-white male panel, and they, the very famous, question was, I forgot who it was that asked her, that he said, "Are you a woman scorned?" Kind of totally
putting the blame on her, which is so wrong.
Right, shitting on her, that it's like, this is I'm a scorned woman.
Pissed.
Right, I'm an angry black woman. So here I am, jeopard. And Anita Hill was a very distinguished, very accomplished woman as well.
That's irrelevant.
yeah, so they're running a lot of parallels to that.
But the biggest distinction is that when Clarence Thomas did what he was accused of doing, he was an adult. We're not talking about a 16-year-old.
Right.
We were talking about a man in his 30s.
Right.
Who also, to your earlier point, had a degree of power that he could wield over someone else.
So I'm very conflicted about this issue. I think this issue is very multi-layered.
Yeah, what do you think?
I think, well, first of all, I think that all these women need to be heard, whether it's 1, 2, 3, or 50 of them. I think they all need to be heard. I believe there should be an FBI investigation for both of them. I think that for both of them, because if I was him, and I'm not a fan of Brett Kavanaugh. I don't want him on the Supreme Court.
But to quote the Legend of Billie Jean,
fair is fair. You know, you're also not going to ruin a man's career, you know, even if I don't agree with his politics, which I do not, and well, not politics, but his leanings in terms of his court decisions. I'm, you know, I don't think somebody should be dismissed because of that. But anyway, I think there should be an FBI investigation, and I think that all sides need to be heard, because if I was him, I would want my name clear. If I really did not do this,
I want you to clear my name.
I want you to
prove it.
Right,
show
exactly.
them, because I know I didn't do anything.
Exactly. And if I was the woman, you know, an FBI investigation should uncover what needs to be uncovered. You know, also it's very complicated because, again, in this whole Me Too era, my bias is always going to be in favor of the women. I mean, we don't have to get into it. We've spoken about it in this. We know how difficult that was for women to be believed and hurt. You're just hurt. Right. So my bias is always in favor of the woman. But in this particular case, there's not like a smoking gun. I was here at this place, and I remember that he raped me, or I remember that he did this.
To draw parallels to Bill Cosby, who this week was also sentenced to time in jail for his rape and sexual assault. There's no pattern. Ultimately, it's not as if in each and every one of these instances he did the exact same actions. So again, I don't know the guy, but it doesn't seem to me like the escalating behavior of a sexual predator.
I don't think anybody's making the argument that he's a sexual predator.
But I think that's where most people want to jump
but the whole
to.
problem is that this has become political, right? Because that's what I was going to say. Whereas all these other cases are not political, this has become political. Because you have Republicans who are saying, we don't need to listen to what she has to say. He's getting confirmed. And then you have Democrats that are like, Kavanaugh needs to shut up and let the women speak. You know, and, you know, he needs to go away. And it's like, no, you need a fair process. I am, for one, I believe that it should be the route of the FBI.
Right, like you
Let
said.
them. They're the Federal Bureau of Investigations. Let them investigate. And if they find out that this guy is a prick and he did these things, then so be it. And if they, you know, and obviously that will take care of his nomination.
Right.
But I say this also, for these people who don't like him and want to bring him down. I mean, what do you think? That let's say that his nomination is pulled. Right. Do you think that Donald Trump is going to then put in, you know, the next nominee is going to be a progressive? I mean, it's probably going to be somebody who's even more conservative than he is. So it's not it's not like, okay, we're going to get rid of this guy because then the next guy they're going to put in is going to be our guy. No. So I just think it's very complicated. It's gotten, you know, you want to hear these women. You want to give them the benefit of, well, you want to give him the benefit of the doubt too, because there's no smoking gun here. It makes it a little bit.
I also think a big part. I know I don't want to fall into the boys will be boys situation, but age in this situation has to factor somehow.
Well,
because we shouldn't be held.
I will say this.
I don't want to say account. I don't know how to phrase it. But you know what I'm trying to say.
And I don't. And again, I'm not a fan of his. And I believe that if the FBI finds that he did this, I don't think he should stay as a nominee. Because, again, you can make the argument that it was 40 years ago, he was being a dumb kid. But you're talking about being a Supreme Court justice. You know? That is beyond. I mean, these people are more important than the president. You know, that's
it's a lifelong appointment.
Yes. So, I mean, these people have to be held to the highest of standards. With that said, I really have a problem with, not only in this case or in any case, where now they're digging up his high school yearbook.
Right.
Because, I mean, come on. I mean, are we going to get to a society, and I think that's a question for society as collectively to answer. Are we going to get to a point where what we said in high school is going to be held against us 30, 40 years later? Because I could tell you, and you were there, as editor-in-chief of the yearbook, we made up shit all the time in the yearbook. We couldn't get a picture by the deadline. We would put Fulana's picture and make up a quote. Yeah. I mean, it's just what it was. We had to, working deadlines and all that stuff. Right. So a yearbook is not the most, while it's very important as an ex-editor of the yearbook, it's not the place that you want to go and quote people on the record. Right? Right. You don't want to, that's not like a deposition record or a testimony. So, I mean, are we really going to start, are we there that we're digging up what people said in a yearbook when they were in high school? Like, it's a very complicated case, and it's become political, and it's become a shit show, just like everything else having to do with politics nowadays. And both sides, I have to say, both sides here are being really bad boys and girls.
Well, I don't disagree with you, but I will say one of the most important things to take away from this, I think, ultimately to your point of, is everything we do in high school going to be held against us, is that sometimes people do change. And I think one of the best indicators...
Wow!
One of the best indicators of that is our next guest, Shannon Martinez, as we said, with the Free Radicals Project, who really spearheads an organization that aims to help people get out of those situations in which they were partaking in this extremist behavior and want to change their life.
Yeah. And we're going to have a great conversation with her. I mean, this is a pretty heavy subject, as we said at the beginning of the show, but, sometimes these heavy subjects are important. So coming up next is our interview with Shannon Martinez
of the Free Radicals Project. Hey listeners, welcome back. So we are here today with Shannon Martinez from the Free Radicals Project, an organization that is actually fantastically, I think, revolutionary in its approach to essentially fighting, this tide of extremism that we're seeing, and really doing it through the digital age, which I think is something that, you really have to understand what's going on in order to be able to do that. So,
and in this day and age, with everything going on, we need people like her more than ever. So, Shannon, welcome to Pero Let Me Tell You.
Thank you so much for having me.
So I want to talk a little bit at first, I guess, about just the Free Radicals Project and really get an understanding of what it is. Now, it is an organization that was founded by a former, I guess, I'm going to use the word extremist, but I don't know what the jargon is exactly, so feel free to correct me at any time, who had been going through that, I guess, white supremacist, alt-right type of lifestyle.
We were both Christian Picciolini and I were both neo-Nazi white supremacist skinheads.
Oh, wow.
We actually knew each other. There are pictures out there of us back when we were in the movement. We've both been disengaged for well over 20 years now. And a few years ago, our paths circled back around, and he was like, hey, we're doing this stuff, like helping people disengage from violent extremism. Do you want to help us? I was like, heck yeah, I want to do that. That sounds fantastic. And so now here we are in our present iteration as the Free Radicals Project.
So tell us a little bit exactly, you use the term disengage a lot, and I think that's a perfect term for this. Explain to us a little bit exactly what you guys do and how you do it.
A lot of it depends on how particular people come to us. One of my passions, one of my main focuses is on developing preventative programming. And, the easiest way to fight violence-based lifestyles is to keep people from getting into them in the first place. So that's part of what we do. One of the other things that we do is the intervention and disengagement part of it. A lot of times when people are like really in the throes of some sort of violence-based lifestyle, and by that, I mean, far right wing, far left wing, gangs, that the ideology isn't as important as it really being, as somebody is looking to violence as the answer for their problems.
I think that's interesting that you made the point. It doesn't have a direction, shall we say? It's not right. It's not left. It's extremist in its purest form, wherever that direction takes.
Well, and even more specifically, it's violence-based extremism. Because there are plenty of ways to be radical, and there's plenty of ways to be an extremist that are not where people are not looking as part of that experience to violence as part of what their belief system is. And so when a lot of times people will reach out on behalf of someone else, that they might say, my son, my daughter, my whoever, they're involved in this, and I see this stuff. What do I do? And so we just begin a dialogue. And if they feel like that person is ready to potentially have a conversation with us, we'll do that. And most of what you do at first is just build trust with somebody. That what we have found is that the stories of former violence-based extremists are eerily similar, no matter what their ideology is, that the details are different, but how everybody has gotten there is really similar. That we were all looking for some sort of, we wanted to feel like we belonged, that we needed some sort of surrogate family or a sense of belonging. We were looking for an identity. We were looking for a way to define ourselves, that however we felt in sort of mainstream life, we didn't feel like we belonged there. We didn't relate with the identities that we were allowed to have. And then we were also all looking for a purpose. We were all looking for some sort of actionable thing to feel like we were part of. On top of that, there's also almost always some kind of trauma or violent sort of tripwire somewhere shuffled into the story. Sometimes people don't know that that's part of their story yet. Part of my story is that I lost my virginity by being raped by two men. They were white men. Raped by two men at a party when I was a couple of weeks shy of 15 years old. If you had asked me, I don't know that I would have been able to say that I was raped, because the story I told myself was simply that I lost my virginity to two men at a party. And that was kind of like a protective mechanism for myself, because I didn't have anyone that I could tell who would empathize or sympathize with me. I would have been in trouble for being at a party rather than oh my gosh, my baby girl just was sexually assaulted. And it took me until the birth of my oldest son, almost 10 years later, for that realization to come sort of crashing down. Sometimes people don't know that violence or trauma is part of their story yet, while they're still in the midst of all of these destructive choices. So when reaching out, you have to build some trust and start looking for, a Christian dubbed the term potholes.
That's exactly what I was going to mention, the potholes.
You start looking for those, that as they're talking, you kind of try to make the connections with, in their story. Okay, well, let me listen beyond just the words for the story behind the story.
So something with what you're saying and your experience, because I've seen several interviews with Christian Picciolini, and he refers to potholes. So in your case, one of your potholes was the sexual assault.
Yes.
That sent you down that route.
Yes. And then I felt like a black sheep in my family. I did not feel like I belonged. We moved when I was 11. We moved across country, and I had trouble fitting in. And I had played a bunch of sports, and slowly circumstances came up where I didn't play sports anymore. So there were all these, these were sort of, for me, these were my potholes. Right. So if somebody were talking to me and they were like, well, tell me about, what's your life or whatever, that if you know what you're listening for, you will end up hearing those kinds of things.
But I think that's interesting. I mean, you say, if you know what you're listening for, and you mentioned, all that disconnected. I mean, I think a lot of, obviously with certain exceptions of certain things you've mentioned, you're kind of describing the quote unquote average teenager. Most teenagers feel disconnected. Most teenagers feel like they don't belong. They feel outside of, oh, my family doesn't understand me, etc. What would you say are some of the I don't want to say warning signs, because I don't know if that's the proper way to put it, but some of the differentiators between what would be considered quote unquote your traditional average teenage rebellion versus starting to go down this path of violent extremism and violent lifestyle. I don't know if there's a one size fits all, but
it's a fantastic question, because it's kind of like the $1 million question. It's like, is there a predictor for people becoming violent-based extremists? And obviously not yet. But some of the things that we can look for, because this is something that I feel very passionate about. That I think we train and teach our children what to do. If there's a fire, or if there's an earthquake, or if there's, a tornado, or what to do when, strangers approach them or whatever. So why don't we just talk starkly about how people are recruited and how people end up in radical extremist movements? Why don't we just teach them what to do and train them in resiliency? So one of the things that's going to happen that you're going to look for, if you're like, oh, here are these people, and wow, it is kind of an indicator if people are looking outside the norm for identity. So all of the counterculture movements that are there, whether it's punk rock, like a lot of us came through like punk rock, or the metal scene or whatever, or there's also, there's also sports and stuff like that, that if you have this really strong identity as, a member or a fan of a particular team or whatever, that you've chosen sort of this like identity that is not necessarily part of just kind of like, hey, I go to this school, or I'm part of this community or whatever. So anytime that you're finding somebody having and developing a single focus,
like a fanaticism.
Yes, but it probably, for most people, it probably won't look like that at first.
Okay.
A lot of my current working theory right now is that because trauma is part of, I feel very confident that trauma of some kind, whether it's personal, like in my case, or collective, like terrorism or war, or, racism, or extreme privilege, or extreme poverty, or in, whatever it is, disenfranchisement, that part of the emerging science about how the brain responds to trauma is that it favors simplistic solutions and simplistic living. So it favors sort of like unidimensional thought, because then your brain doesn't have to do the work of sorting information. If you're just like, this thing, I wake up and I listen to this music, and this is who I am, and this is my identity, and this is, that you don't have to kind of sort through the differing priorities that come, for people who are leading healthy, well-adjusted lives, that, it's like different things have different amounts of importance given the circumstances.
Right.
For people whose brains have experienced trauma, that it's very difficult for their brains to sort that out. And so if you notice someone in your life and it's like they start that it's the only thing they talk about, and if they, even if they get hyper political, and that's not necessarily like that's the tripping point or whatever, it's something to watch. That it's like, okay, this person went from talking about all kinds of stuff to now they only talk about this segment of politics, and that's our only interaction. And no matter what we're doing, they bring it back to here. Definitely, that's somebody to keep an eye on. Right. And whatever that is, whether it's any kind of like, it could even be good stuff, things that we dub as good, but those are people definitely to keep an eye on, and then maybe try to engage them in community building activities, things where they can participate in positive ways. Christian and I actually differ on this a little bit, because his story is that he feels like if somebody had come along and said to him, hey, why don't we go build houses for impoverished people in Guatemala? He would have been like, okay, that sounds awesome. Let's go do that. But for me, I was so rage-filled that violent expression had to be part of where I went. I had to, like, I was very drawn to the violence, and where it was okay for me to rage. That was something that was very important to me, because it was like a release valve. I needed that beyond just the identity, community, and purpose for myself. I needed somewhere where it was okay to be really, really angry, because I couldn't process through any of that. So I needed a place for myself where that was okay. So that would also be an indicator that you would definitely want to probably engage someone with, is if you notice, like, beyond just teenage angst.
Right.
Because, it's like, obviously, like, lots of teenagers are struggling to understand their place in the world and who they are and how they fit in, and a sense of community. And lots of times there's angst. But this is, what I'm talking about is like when it trips over to rage, when it's deep-seated anger.
Now, you said something that I thought was really interesting, because in your story, obviously, and being the victim of rape and sexual abuse, you talk about the rage and the anger, and then you mentioned Christian, and something that I really was taken aback by. I saw his TED Talk, and to our listeners out there, I urge you to look up Christian Picciolini on the TED Talks.
Yeah. And we'll post a link on our.
He has
a
fantastic TED Talk, and I've actually I
So
saw
good.
it some time ago, and what I was really taken back about his particular story was that he came from an immigrant family. His parents were Italian. He says he grew up in a loving family, that they were very hard workers, and he knew that his parents loved him, but he felt there came a point in his life that he felt disenfranchised, disconnected, and as you said, he formed or found this avenue in extremism, and I what I really found interesting about his story was that that's not the face that you would assume,
the prototypical thought
of a white supremacist or an extremist, because again, he came from an immigrant family, he came from a loving family, because I think in maybe in your case, and correct me if I'm wrong, because yours came from an area of rape and abuse, it's easier to understand the rage, the internal rage that you had inside,
Yes.
whereas he came from a loving family.
Yeah, at first blush, it doesn't seem like your typical scenario.
Yes. Well, and I also, like, my parents just celebrated their 50th wedding anniversary.
Congratulations.
Like, I grew up, I have nothing to do with it.
Hey, but
I did my best to ruin that. all my teenage choices. But they, but it was we still had a pretty dysfunctional family. But from the outside, it's like we were middle class, upwardly mobile, white Christian Americans. Like, nobody would have been like, this girl's gonna, and I was a star athlete and stuff. Nobody was gonna be like, hey, this girl is definitely gonna become a Nazi one day. Nobody would have guessed that.
In what ages were you an extremist?
From the time I was about 15 and a half until just shy of 20. So from about 15 to 20 for about 5 years.
Those are very formative years.
Yes. And it's so like, I still, like, there's still stuff I'm really bad at. So luckily I have teenage daughters now. So like, I'm like, kids, this shirt, like, they're like, no, Mom, it looks like curtains. I'm like, because everything, I still want to be like, I just still want to wear like Doc Martens. And like, I don't know, I've never learned how to like dress. One of my daughters is like really into makeup, and she's like, okay, Mom, like, let's go to the store.
Sephora.
Now,
yes. No, and she's like, here, this is how you use highlighter. I'm like, I didn't even know this was a thing. Like, thanks. So I can like act quasi legitimate now. But those were things that I never learned how to do. I don't know how to wear shoes at all. I'm just like, because I wore Doc Martens like for 5 years, like even after that for another 10 or whatever.
Better late than never. But what I was going to ask you is, you mentioned that the birth of your first child was very important. What else started your transition and your disengagement from the movement?
For me, and again, this is one of those areas for all formers where there's a lot of overlap. The specifics are different. But all of us end up experiencing love, empathy, compassion, that set of emotions. All of us end up being connected in some way with an idea of future. Because when you're really in the midst of all of this really, hate-filled ideology, like a lot of what's going on is that you feel personally worthless and valueless. And so that, all of your identity gets wrapped up and value gets wrapped up in the expression of this hate and this ideology, which is why it's really dangerous. Because if you don't value your own life and you only value the ideology, that it's like then you're willing to make huge sacrifices for, huge violence or whatever for your cause. It's how suicide bombers and stuff happen. All of us end up being connected with at least some hint and idea of future. Sometimes that's the birth of a child or, whatever. In my case, I ended up being taken in by a mom of a guy that I was going out with. She was a single mom and she had 3 younger sons, and the guy I was going out with was in the army. So he was still in training and wasn't living at home. Mm-hmm. And I needed a place to live. And she was like, well, you can come stay here. And before it was even a term to pay it forward, a mom had taken her oldest son in when he was struggling a little bit earlier in his teenage years. And she was just like, if I ever have an opportunity to do this for someone, I will. And I was the very, very, very lucky beneficiary of that. She knew my ideology. She knew what I was. She did not agree with it, but she never confronted me directly with it. She took me into her home with her 3 younger sons and was just like, okay, you can live here. You have to help around the house, help me with some projects, try to get a job, and then
these are my rules.
But we played Frisbee and went camping and fishing, and I took the boys to Cub Scouts and read them the Chronicles of Narnia before bed. And then she dreamed dreams for me that I had forgotten how to dream for myself.
Oh, wow.
Like she was like, don't you go to college? Like, don't you want to do that? And I was like, yeah, maybe. And it was before the internet. So beyond just that, she tangibly connected me with the resources that I needed to start making those things happen. So she drove me to the library, helped me look up addresses for colleges, helped me find out information about taking my SATs, helped me to do that. Help me, not just hey, isn't this thing? She's like, all right, what are the steps and how can I help you achieve those steps to make these things happen? And so that was enough for me, that completely undeserved empathy and compassion, and somebody who decided that I had worth and value, and so if she was going to look at me that way, it really had to challenge my ideas about my own worth and value. And in turn, that, it's like if I was no longer dehumanizing myself, that I really had to come to terms with how I was dehumanizing and objectifying other people. And that allowed me the space to begin to do that. It would still be, I was a mess, a total mess. I was just shy of 20 at the time. And it would take me at least 4 years to even come to grips with the fact that I had been raped, to frame it that way. And so only then to begin to process through the trauma and begin to heal from that. But even after that still took another probably 10 years to really even understand that I had PTSD. And, so it still took a long time just for that real, for even just that triage in the beginning. It wasn't just I was taken in by this family and everything's great. No, but it gave me the opportunity to have that space to break my echo chamber. Because in my case, I just lived with other skinheads and neo-Nazis all the time.
So Shannon, that's a remarkable story about how you progressed and the beginning of your transition and from radicalism. And I know that one of the things that the free radicals do, it's that you're not per se so confrontational with the people that come to your organization, but rather you show them that there's another life out there, that there's other things. Talk to us a little bit about exactly when somebody comes to you guys, how you start this process, because I imagine it's a daunting process to disengage someone and kind of show them that everything they believed in is sort of wrong.
One of the things that we do is scour the news for people who are either have been recently exposed, sometimes, on the far left, that they will do what's known as doxing someone, and they will like release all their personal information and stuff. And whenever possible, we try to get contact information for the individual who's just been doxed and just shoot them an email. Like, it can't hurt, right? Just be like, hey, there's something else out here. Like, if you find yourself and you don't know what to do and you don't know what your next step is, we're here, and there's just this whole extended family of formers here. So we can help you find your way if you choose to reach out. So that's one of the things that we do. Another, again, a lot of what we do is that there are concerned families, and that a lot of times they will facilitate conversations, or we try to give some skills and ideas to the family members so they don't feel so alone, so that they have something that they, some tools and skills that they feel like they can utilize, and maybe try to find some idea of compassion, because it's like, holy cow, what, like, my kid or, my cousin that I've known my whole life, like, is a Nazi. Like, how do you deal with
how'd that happen?
Yeah. And what do you do? Like, how do I treat them or whatever? And so teaching them about, like, hey, like, you do not have to be like, hey, your ideology is just fine. No, you don't need to do that. Like, you say, no, this is not acceptable, and I won't talk about that with you, but I love you no matter what beliefs you have, or, or whatever is appropriate for the situation. But it does not mean that you have got to, like, not make a big deal about their ideology. It's not effective. Or you can never argue someone out of what they believe. The internet has shown us this.
Right.
If nothing else.
Oh, absolutely. And I'm glad you mentioned the internet, because one of the reasons, I know DJ mentioned that he had seen Christian's TED Talk and the like, but the reason you came to my attention is because I work in the ad industry, and I've seen an article that came out recently, I think it was back in May, it was announced your organization is working with a multicultural agency, a Hispanic-focused agency called Alma. And really, you guys are working on a campaign or an initiative that I thought was very fascinating in terms of trying to figure out how people are being recruited using this new technology, using the internet. So I don't know if maybe you can go into a little bit more about what that partnership and that project is about.
Sure. We're partnered with Atma Ad Agency. Mm-hmm. And basically, if somebody searches enough times for some particular keywords and stuff, that their search is then sort of hijacked and brought to our site, letting them know, like, hey, the search, somebody like Dylan Roof, for example, has searched for these same things. And, that searches like yours have led to such and such an outcome. And, it's like, if you need help, we're here to get out. There's also some other programs. I also work for the Against Violence and Extremism Network, which is an umbrella program through the Institute for Strategic Dialogue, which is a London-based think tank, and they have a program that we do that's called it's like the one-on-one initiative. Mm-hmm. And again, it uses keywords that they've, because computers are so good at finding patterns, they've actually found keywords. And there's a thing going around on Facebook right now where it's like, with people who are depressed tend to use particular keywords, not necessarily like negative keywords either, that they've identified. So Facebook is really good at identifying keywords, and then pegging that and just being like, then it's a one-on-one conversation. Like, hey, you've used these words, a lot in your posting, and did you know that? Like, are you okay? Like, what, just developing a conversation with that person. So, and the unfortunate part about a lot of these programs is that it feels like we're always one step behind a lot of the recruiting tactics, and a lot of it too, as there's more programs like that, a lot of the real serious stuff goes on like the dark web and proton mail and like, double encrypted messaging and stuff. And,
you mentioned recruiting tactics. Can you get into that a little bit? Like what kind of recruiting tactics are being used? Because I think in the past, it was about come to our rally, come to our, organization's meeting place or what have you. And now they don't even have to do that. they can basically come into your home.
A lot of the tactics that are being used are actually, and again, this can be very powerful as we fight against this, that the extreme far right, for example, have really infiltrated and targeted message boards and places where people who self-identify as depressed congregate and look and seek help. They target searches on YouTube, again, sort of co-opting the ideas of because they know that people who feel alienated and feel alone and feel hopeless, that they're going to be the people who are possibly the most open to messaging that provides some, solution to their perceived problem. There's also an emerging trend that high functioning autistics and people who are on the autism spectrum are also targeted.
Oh, wow.
And
why is that? Because I'd never heard that before.
I have a stepson who is severely autistic, who's diagnosed as severely autistic. Mm-hmm. And then I have at least 2 of my 7 kids are on the autism spectrum. Mm-hmm. I think that a lot of that tendency is that it's difficult for autistics to understand the intentions that other people have towards them a lot of times. And that even though the sort of prevailing understanding is that autistics lack empathy, my experience, as told to me by the autistics and people on the spectrum in my life, mm-hmm. is that they're actually hyper empathetic, and that a lot of times it gets all bound up, and the difficulty is in expressing that outward, and so they're sort of hyper empathic, and that can actually be really crushing, and to a point where they can feel like they don't have agency. That it's they feel all these things and they feel everything, but they don't feel like they can do anything about anything. And so if a group comes along and is giving them an opportunity to do something about something and make it sound like it's important and big and they're part of this thing and they'll be treated as equals and they won't be made fun of, and and we've got you, and you couple that with not necessarily understanding people's ill intentions towards them, that you can see how that would be a very powerful combination for people who are trying to just sort of build an army of bodies.
Perfect storm of situation.
Oftentimes when I watch, white supremacists speak on TV or on the news, and they make these statements against, blacks, Latinos, African Americans, Jews, whatever. I always question, what is it that you want? Do you want to go back to slave days? Do you want for immigrants to all leave the country? What is the, I guess, goal of a white supremacist?
Ironically, there's not even one answer. That the movement is so fractured that it doesn't even have one sort of contained identity, and one unique goal. Some people will want to return. They'll want a white ethno state, and they'll say we don't hate blacks or Hispanics. We just want our own place, which is an inherently white supremacist idea, but in their mind, they can argue that away. I don't think there's a very strong movement to go back to slave days or whatever. And I think you would probably be hard pressed to get anyone to actually give you a really clear answer on that, because basically what they want is a sense of empowerment. That if you look at this as these are people who feel deeply disempowered, so disempowered in their lives that they have turned to, actively disempowering other people as the only means to feel powerful in their life, that's really all they want.
So something else that, we can't have this conversation without touching upon this, is the data that shows that, these extremist groups have, I think, doubled or drastically increased in the last 10 years. I mean, how is this happening? Why is this happening?
Some of it is definitely the emergence of access to the internet and the way that it's used. Some of those numbers are potentially misleading because of what it means to be a member, that if the buy-in, so to speak, is much less in an online community. It's very easy to become part of it. Whereas when I and Christian, when we were involved, it was you had to physically go be with your crew, and you would have to fight and do all that. So the buy-in is a lot easier for people to identify with.
So nowadays you can just comment on a Reddit thread and be considered part of the group.
Yes, but it also means that it's easier for people to get out too. That it's you don't have the same level of ties that you have to break to disengage. So it's both good and bad. The other thing that I think that I would love somebody to do a study about would be an overlay of times of economic downturn or perceived economic downturn, because I don't know about y'all, but I know in theory, the recession is over, but very few people I know have economically recovered.
Oh, I agree 100%.
And the percentage of income going towards healthcare, housing, transportation, and food, the percentage of that has gone up definitely in the last 10 years. And wages have not kept pace. So right. Despite the fact that people who are wealthy tell us that the recession is done. And I would love to see a study that overlays times of economic downturn or perceived economic downturn with an upswing in religious and race-based crimes, because I believe very strongly that there is a correlation, not necessarily a causation, but that when people feel like that access to resources is being limited, that they become entrenched in wanting to maintain the access that they already have to resources, or to fight for even more access to those resources, or to limit access to other people. That a lot of how this, a lot of the way that violence-based ideologies plays out is that it's a perception of resources is really what we're talking about. That it's we really want to be the only ones that get to have power. We're really the only ones who we want to get to make any decisions. We want to get all and keep all of the stuff.
Yeah, it's a perception of they. If they, whoever they is,
yes.
didn't exist, I would have more Social Security. I would have more health insurance, etc.
Right.
Yes.
So, also curious in terms of what your take, if at all, what is your take on the current political climate and the current administration with, again, the rise, or at least the people being vocal about extremism?
Did not expect to have to answer this at 6:30 on a Tuesday, right?
Well, today is the day where after, suddenly we're making a U-turn about, violently separating children at the border from their families. And that decision has been reversed. So, I guess, I don't know, or it just is saying it is, or whatever.
As of right now, it's been reversed, who whatever that means.
I think that, if you think, how much have we undergone in the last year and a half? It feels like lifetimes.
It does.
That, it's that the cabinet, in its first iteration, was filled with people that had really overt racist backgrounds and past. People like Steve Bannon and stuff that... And I think some of that was really solidifying, that it was on purpose to solidify this particular segment of the population, that hopeful people, a hopeful people is a powerful people. A hopeless people are people that are easily, marginalized and manipulated and controlled. And so if you look at a lot of what the administration does as offering hope to a particular segments of the population, it makes a lot more sense that they're trying to mobilize their base, people who are hyper conservative. I hate to even say that because, it's like it seems so far removed from what conservatism actually originally was. Right. And, people that are populist and willing to vote maybe against their own best interests out of fear, people that, those Fox News watchers who treat that as gospel, that a lot of the actions of the current administration seem to be aimed at mobilizing that very vocal, willing to believe anything as long as it's negative about the other side fan base.
You think there's an element of I've got nothing left to lose, because you said, it's people who feel hopeless, right? So it's kind of I'm already in this quote unquote situation. Things suck. So, all right, you seem to be on board with what I'm thinking, and you're probably going to help me out.
And you may even also be offering me hope. That I think what we don't understand, those of us who, feel like we are way on the other end of the political spectrum, that I think part of what we are missing is that for those who support the administration, that they have hope in a way that they haven't felt in touch with in a long time. That Obama's hope to the left was not the hope to the right, or not even the right. The people who support the present administration. Yeah. Yes. I don't want to call everyone who supports Donald Trump an extremist, but
I'm trying to find the right word. And it's difficult.
I don't know how to say. I'm trying to be charitable. So trying to give people the benefit of the doubt because as time goes on, to me, I'm like, how can you continue to just give adulation to this person who seems so hell-bent on
it's almost like a blind faith to a degree with certain people. And that, I think, for me specifically, is just a little scary. Not because it's Trump. I feel that way about anybody. You know what I mean? It's like you can't just go unquestioningly following the Pied Piper.
Yes. No. I personally was not a big Obama fan because I felt like he was in the pocket of the big banks and all of the drone bombings, and like there was a lot of stuff going on. And so like for me, that was not like, oh, this is right. Our guy or whatever. A lot of people loved him, and but for me, he was way too moderate. Like, but even the kind of devotion to Obama seems just nothing compared to the hero worship of Trump. That his ratings have gone up. Mm-hmm. And I was like, how? Like, I don't even understand. I don't even understand
how those work at this point.
How that? Yeah. Like, is it just made up? I don't know. Because I feel like I have a lot of conversations with a lot of different people, and like almost no one is like, yeah, there are a handful of people.
Yeah.
But.
So, given your story and how you managed to turn things around, and really you were given the opportunity again by just one person making that difference. I know it sounds so cliche and so Pollyanna, but it really does it makes me feel like, there is an opportunity for things to turn around. It just takes one person.
You never know. Like, you never know. So like when you really want to be like, what the hell is wrong with you? And then if you can be like, hey, how'd you get there? Like, I don't agree with that at all. How did you get there? When did you start believing this? What, like, can you explain it to me? You never know that if you choose to treat another human being with dignity and as a human and not as an ideologue, you never know what the end result is. You don't know. You might know. They might come back and be like, hey, because I didn't know that was happening as it was happening.
Yeah, and I feel that happens a lot of times when there's misinformation or lack of education, of understanding with people. But Empathy, yeah. But, we could go on and on about that. But I think that's a great way to end this interview. I can't thank you enough. I think that this is an important conversation, especially nowadays. Obviously, the work that you guys do is extremely important, but these are the tough conversations that we have to have nowadays because of where we are. And so I can't thank you enough.
Please feel free to go to the website freeradicals.org. There's information.
We're also on Facebook.
They're also on Facebook. Are any other social media platforms that you guys are currently on?
We're not yet. There eventually here in the next couple weeks we'll have an Instagram going, and but Christian and I both have individual Instagram accounts. He has a Twitter account.
I was gonna say, can you please get on Twitter, because Twitter feels like it just needs you guys there.
Yes,
Twitter
He's
needs
there,
your help.
but
Yes.
I'm just like, I'm just like, everyone has their like job to do, I'm just kind of like. If I do that, like I won't do anything else. I'll get, I'm trying to maintain hope is my top priority. Twitter is the antithesis of holding hope.
Twitter's so just vitriolic. It's just so.
I know. We should just shut it down. Can't we like crash their servers?
It's amazing how much
really
meanness they can put in 140 characters. Like.
It's terrible.
Right, but I mean, now y'all have interviewed me, so you know that the whole like limited character thing, like no way. Like I'm so verbose. There's no way.
No, but there's times that being brief is good, and there's times that not being brief is even better. So, and this is definitely one of the situations. So, again, Shannon, thank you so much for being on our podcast. We can't thank you enough.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you so much for having me. And if there's anything I can ever do for you, please don't hesitate to reach out.
Well, likewise on our end as well.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
All right. Well, that was it was a great interview. I mean, it was heavy. I think, throughout she was there were moments of levity, where we joked and things like that. But again, to what I said earlier, I think it's important to note that you shouldn't just always write somebody off.
Right. There's always redemption.
Yeah.
There's always redemption.
Not for everybody, but,
Not for everybody, but, I mean...
But give it a shot. Most people are worth the opportunity.
Yes. And they're definitely... because they were really out there. They were
pretty deep into it, yeah.
Yeah. So, anyway.
Yeah. And now she's married to a Hispanic.
Yeah, viste how the world works. It's soda time.
It is soda time.
So, our last Coke of the desert.
Yes.
La última Coca-Cola del desierto, which now has become, I feel it's become like our thing now.
Well, of course it's our thing. That's what we wanted to happen.
So, I'm going to lighten it up.
All right, lighten it up.
And
I think you're going to like mine.
Oh, no. I think you're going to like mine too.
Okay.
My last Coke of the desert goes to the new version of Magnum PI.
Oh, you saw it this week?
I saw it because I like Jay Martinez.
I do too. There's something about him agradable.
Just like
Jay, if you're listening, we'd love to have you on the show.
Yeah. He's Mexican American.
Yeah.
He's one of these people that I've always liked him, and
he's always been there.
He's a little bit of a teaser. Like he'll be in a movie, like he was in that Bad Moms.
Yes, Bad Moms
movie.
Yeah.
He'll pop up here and there, and it's
you always enjoy him.
Yeah, and every time he comes up, it's like, oh, it's G Martinez, and. Anyway, he's Magnum PI, and you know what I liked about the show? Obviously, it's modern, so a lot of it, there's modern technology, like obviously your cell phones and GPS and satellites and all that, but it's still very much the original Magnum. The helicopter looks the same.
Oh, really?
He has the original Ferrari.
It's the original?
Yeah. Well, I don't know if it's the original, but it's like the Ferrari from the 80s. And I thought the show was fun, and you know what? And I have to say that, something they say about television now is that we're in the golden age of television.
Yes.
Which I agree. I think that the television programming now it's amazing. Mm-hmm. It's the quality and the storytelling is great. But the flip side to that is that, these shows like Game of Thrones, Handmaid's Tale, they're so heavy.
Yeah. And
yes, they're amazing, but they're so heavy. I mean, talk about the Free Radicals project. Yeah. I mean, this is like heavy TV watching that at the end of the world, the end of the show, you're like, okay, the world is coming to an end. And they, there's so much prolonging and And I think
especially American television, because we love our 20+ episodes of a season.
Yes. So I think there's something to be said about a nice show that's fun, a little bit of action, and at the end of the hour, it's over. It's
In an
done.
hour, it's done.
It's done. You don't have to think about it. It's done. Next week I'll watch the new episode, but I'm not there sitting like, what is Magnum gonna do in the next episode?
Always gonna win.
Right. It's exactly. Somehow,
right.
He's gonna make it through. So, for those of you who haven't seen it, it's on CBS on Monday nights. Mm-hmm. If you're a kid of the 80s, you'll love that. As I said, Jay Martinez is in it. It's a great cast. They switched it up a little bit, but it was fun. So that's my last Coke of the Desert to Magnum PI, the new Magnum PI.
Oh, there you go.
And he did not bring the mustache. He brought the goatee.
But is he still wearing Hawaiian shirts?
Not in the first episode, but he will in subsequent episodes.
Right.
He got asked that question a lot.
Okay. So, keeping on that theme, actually, mine also goes to something 80s related, or someone 80s related. My last soda of the desert goes to Paula Abdul.
Oh, well, okay, what took you 34 episodes to give Paula Abdul your last Coke?
I will tell you. A couple of weeks ago, she was on James Corden.
Uh-huh.
And she performed Straight Up, and it was a great performance. I mean, did you see it? Or?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, because it was in support of the fact that she was launching a 25-city tour. It's called Straight Up Paula. Unfortunately, Homegirl is not coming to South Florida or Florida at all, because we could have driven to Orlando. Mm-hmm. But the fact that Paula Abdul's going on tour and she's just, she's Paula. She's still rocking the choreography. She's, she hasn't lost any of it. There's just something about her that she always seemed just perpetually just happy to be at the party.
Yeah, she's a happy girl.
She never tried to be more than what she was.
Right.
She understood her role in pop culture.
Right.
And I embrace her for it. So my last soda of the desert goes to Paula Abdul.
And you know what?
Being forever my girl.
And she's forever one of my girls too, because you know what? Her music is now, late 80s, early 90s, and I think that her music has aged really well.
Yeah.
Because if you hear Straight Up is still a great song.
I would almost say that her first album has aged better than her second.
Yeah, because her second album is more New Jack Swing, which was very 1991, 1992. Yeah. But even Rush Rush, which is from the second album, that's a great little song. And Blowing Kisses in the Wind and...
Vibology. I'm sorry. I will stand by that.
What's the one of the grassy field? Where she stretched. Promise of a New Day. Where she stretched. Oh my God, I love that. 34 episodes in, and how did we...
Because she had to go on tour.
Oh, what's the closest city she's coming to?
I don't even think she's coming to Georgia. I mean,
you know what it is. Georgia's our neighbor state, but that means nothing to us because that's still... Atlanta's like a 12-hour drive.
So we fly to New York. It's about the same time.
No, I would see Paula in L.A. Because she's a Laker girl.
That's true.
Yeah, she's not from New York, so she's not very New York. So Jay Martin, Magnum PI, and Paula Abdul, both from the 80s.
That's what I'm saying.
Actually, you know what? I'm going to leave you with something else of Magnum PI that actually you would enjoy, and to our listeners, if you watch it.
I think it's funny you picked Magnum PI because my mother thinks Tom Selleck is so sexy.
I think it's so funny that there were so many women that were like, well, he was a heartthrob.
She kind of says that's why she married my father.
She
feels like he kind of looked like Tom Selleck.
Now you need to put a picture of your dad and Tom Selleck.
Yes.
There's a scene which I thought was hilarious where he comes out without a shirt and he's been out of the shower, and that's supposed to be the scene where you show the sexy Magnum PI, come out, and he's in a towel, he's covering himself with a towel. But what I think is hilarious is that he is dripping wet, like
he just got out of the shower.
Le tiraron un cubo de agua. He literally was dripping. He was dripping. And I'm thinking, didn't production see this? And then, that's the moment that he gets a phone call that something had happened, and he puts on his shirt. And I'm thinking, you put on your shirt and you are empapado. It wasn't that, in movies, when people are wet,
they have a glow.
They have a glow, that moist but not wet look, that's supposed to be sexy. No. He was le tiraron un cubo de agua. And I'm like, you can't put on your shirt like that. That's what I was thinking.
That's great.
You need to watch it. You'll get a kick out of that. So
That's awesome.
Anyway, what else, everybody? That was episode 34, and we hope, as always, you listened, laughed, and learned. I know this was a bit of a heavier episode, but we kind of ended in a light note.
As we do.
So remember to grab your croqueta, your pastelito, and your jupiña, and we hope you have a great day.
Yep, and don't forget to subscribe across all the various platforms. Check us out on social media, Instagram, Facebook, and if you got iTunes, leave us a review. It helps us get found on the search.
Yes, sir. Bueno, thank you, everybody.
Bye.